game. All right, the news of the day as it relates to the NBA. Adrian Wojnarowski reporting Kevin Durant has requested the Nets to trade him. Last August, of course, he signed a 4-year extension, which in theory would tie him to Brooklyn through the 25-26 season. But contracts in the NBA, if you're a star player, don't matter at all. You don't want to do it? You got the power to say, I don't want to do it. Adrian Wojnarowski, speaking of power. Woj, thanks for taking the time to visit with me here. How'd we get here?
I think Kevin Durant, Scott, I think from the moment he came to Brooklyn with Kyrie Irving and the expectations of having walked away from that Golden State team, I think in the end they were overwhelming. The disappointment, all the things that led to this group underachieving, from injuries to the vaccine mandate this season. And listen, part of it too, and you talk to people around Kevin Durant and the Nets, Golden State winning the championship this season, and just the flood of criticism and second guessing that landed on Kevin Durant, I think it contributed to a tipping point. He wanted to get Kyrie Irving a long-term deal in Brooklyn, wanted to help him get him that. He wasn't able to. And I think once Irving opted back into that deal, Kevin Durant hadn't talked to the organization in weeks, and neither, I think, Kevin Durant or Kyrie Irving, since Kyrie opted into the deal, have been in communication. There was a sense of inevitability around the Nets and around the league that this day was coming, that Durant was going to ask out, and then today he called Joe Tsai, their owner, and he asked out.
Well, just real quickly, I think there were people that initially thought, oh, wow, Kyrie opts back in, then Durant asked for a trade, connected the dots and thought, oh, he wants to get away from Kyrie. That's not what this is.
Kevin Durant's going to have to talk at some point about this, but I do think, the criticism that came with, you traded Steph Curry and that group you had there for Kyrie Irving. Obviously, investing in Irving as a partner, it was a mistake here. I mean, if the goal was to win and win championships, it's been a mistake. And so while I think the relationship, has remained pretty close, and he certainly fought to keep him here, even with 4 years left on his deal, there's almost a sense, Kevin, in the league now, you're entering the transfer portal. I want out, and I'm asking out now.
That's just nuts to me as an aside here, Woj. I got other stuff I want to get to. I just don't know in the league anymore. Like, you got a 4-year deal. It doesn't matter. If you're a superstar player, just like, I'm not going to do it. How can you function as a business if this is how it goes?
Yeah, the one thing that having 4 years left on his deal does, Scott, is it gives the Nets a lot of leverage in how they can trade.
I get that.
Kevin Durant, right? They're able to send him almost anywhere they want to, because even small market teams who otherwise would never have access to a Kevin Durant unless they drafted him know if we trade for him, he's got to play here. He's under contract for 4 years. He loves basketball too much. Unless he doesn't want to. And we've seen that happen with players in the past couple of years. Look, Durant's, he's my favorite player to watch. I'm not anti him. I just think at some point, this is a whole other conversation. Where do trade talks stand at the moment? What do we know? A tremendous ferocity tonight in the Brooklyn front office. The level of intensity of the volume of calls, the number of teams. I had a couple teams, Scott, tell me tonight that they did something they had never done before. That they called and made an offer to Brooklyn, and they called back later in the day, in the evening, and made a better offer without Brooklyn countering it. And they said, listen, we know this isn't necessarily great business, but that's how badly teams want Kevin Durant and want to make sure that if this process does move quickly, and knowing how many teams are in it, that they're making competitive offers. And there's never quite been a player of Durant's stature at this point in his career available for a trade, certainly in the modern era. And so Brooklyn, listen, they intend to try to get back, something of a historic haul. They look at what the Clippers had to pay for Paul George. They look at what the Lakers had to pay for Anthony Davis. They want more than that.
And they should. This is a transcendent talent, arguably the greatest scorer on the planet. And so it's fascinating, Woj, because we're getting, we're in the middle of free agency, but there's a bunch of teams that are like, we didn't have any clue this guy was going to be available. Now, theoretically, he is. So how much business around the league is essentially being put on hold while teams take their best swing here?
Well, listen, I think, you look at the Atlanta Hawks as an example. They were a team that I think would have loved to be involved in the Kevin Durant sweepstakes. And they made a trade yesterday, giving up 3 first-round picks and a pick swap for DeJounte Murray in San Antonio. So think of that. Three unprotected first-round picks for DeJounte Murray, who's a fine young player, made his first All-Star game. What is Kevin Durant worth? But if you're Atlanta,
sure,
you gassed your assets there, not knowing that this all was going to come a day later. And so I don't know if it's necessarily holding up business in the league because, free agency at this point, I think we kind of know all the key players out there are going back to their teams at some point here. But it has really created a frenzy unlike, I think, anything we've seen. It's only been several hours. It's going to play out here over the weekend.
I could keep going, but you've already been off your phone for 7 minutes, so I want to let you get to that. You know how much I appreciate and respect your time, so I'll say thank you. Until next time, Woj, be well, all right?
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate you.
No doubt. Adrian Wojnarowski. Around the internet, people got involved, as they do. Paulo Banchero, little wishful thinking on the gram. Devontae Adams, why not? He tags Durant. How about...
Raiders!
Wait a minute.
Raiders!
Grand Canyon University. They posted on Twitter. Anything's possible. I don't think that's possible. I think there's rules. Oh, maybe there's not rules anymore. The head football coach down there in Oxford, Lane Kiffin, famous play on Durant's post announcing his move to the Warriors. Come to the SIP. We got name, image, and likeness. They got dough down there. Grove, they could figure that out.
Has raised the fever considerably. We don't know what's going to happen now. Let's get into the implications from an executive's point of view. And we'll start with Sean Marks, who's had quite a couple of years, by the way, with the Brooklyn Nets, considering where they were, what they built, how it kind of collapsed, and where they are now. What is on his plate right now?
It's amazing, Matt. 3 years ago today, to the day, Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving joined the Brooklyn Nets. DeAndre Jordan came with them. We were talking about them as potentially the next dynasty, the championship favorite. A lot has gone wrong since then. I think that's an understatement. So we'll see what happens with KD. It was just last August he signed the 4-year, $198 million extension. So this really would be an unprecedented trade with a superstar in his prime who has that much time left on his contract. We'll see if Brooklyn honors his request. Obviously, with a 4-year deal, they're under no obligation to do so, Sean. But you have to imagine their phone is ringing a lot right now in the Nets front office trying to figure out what they're going to do with Kevin Durant.
Yeah, I think that's really the question here. Do you do Kevin Durant a big solid and take him to the team where he wants to go? Or do you say, hold on a second, my obligation is to the Brooklyn Nets. We're going to take the best deal possible to help us.
Right.
Because this really didn't work out. And you said an interesting thing. It was Harden, it was Kyrie, it was KD. They ended up playing 16 games together. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, it all fell apart. This was a franchise that was supposed to contend for titles for the next 2, 3, 4 years. And now they're stuck with Kyrie Irving. And by the way, the domino effect of KD asking out, why do they hold on to Kyrie Irving? They only held on to Kyrie Irving because of KD. Now that KD's gone, why would you bring back Kyrie Irving, deal with the potential of the headache of him possibly not playing games next season? You're trying to move this franchise forward. I don't think you can move this franchise forward if you're going to get that kind of Kyrie Irving next season.
So many potential ripples around the league because of this news today. Obviously, you probably know already, Kyrie Irving opted in to the final year of his deal, $36 million. On paper, there's no reason to think that the Nets with Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, and Ben Simmons, if he's healthy, can't fill in around those players and be really good next season. Is that your job if you're Sean Marks today, to try to convince everyone, look at what we have here, we can still contend?
And that's the balance, Matt, in the dance between the Nets on one side and Kevin Durant and his camp on the other. Because you're right, with 4 years left on KD's deal, Brooklyn does not have to trade him at any time. They can hang on to Kevin. They do have some key decisions coming up in free agency. Patty Mills opted out of his player option. Nick Claxton is a restricted free agent. Bruce Brown is unrestricted. So if they re-sign Summer, all of those guys, with Joe Harris back, this is probably one of the favorites in the Eastern Conference on paper. But if Kevin Durant is unhappy, does that matter? And to Sean's point, with Kyrie opting in now on the one-year deal, the Nets could pivot and trade him. They could trade Kyrie Irving and retain Kevin Durant, try to build around Kevin. One final point on Brooklyn that I think is important. Because of what they gave up to get James Harden from Houston, they owe the Rockets a bunch of first-round picks and pick swaps that are unprotected over the next 5 years. So, guys, I don't think leaning into a rebuild, trading Kevin Durant for, say, a bunch of draft picks and young players, I don't think that's an option for Brooklyn. I think they put themselves in this position where either they retain KD or if he goes out, they need a veteran star or veteran stars plural coming back in return.
There certainly are paths available to them if they keep Kyrie Irving, assuming they trade Kevin Durant, that if the Durant trade brings back good enough players,